Hi, it's Joe Volpe. Welcome back. We're here on behalf of Corriere Canadese, North America's only Italian language newspaper, and the Go Live TV and the Corcan Media Group. Today we're going to be talking again about law and reality, immigration issues. I think you saw the title up a moment ago, immigration and the concept of substitutive evaluation. Now to go through that with me again today is Richard Borat,
Sir.
Noted immigration lawyer of great experience, many years.
Thank you.
And when we talked about this on Wednesday, Richard, we'll get right down to it. We talked about the way that the plan, you like the plan, you like the government plan,
Sure.
It's well detailed. And so for everybody, just so we know, and then you can disagree with me, I know you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? So
When you were minister, you were God, and we disagreed, as I recall.
yeah, so there obviously wasn't much of a God then. But so what happens once a year, the Minister of Immigration, in this case it's Ahmed Hussein, stands up in the House of Commons and he says, look, in the interests of Canada, in Canadian economic and demographic interests, here's the plan the government wants Parliament to accept about the number of people that we're going to bring into this country. I've got that right so far?
That's what he says. Yeah, that's what he does.
So he gets the approval of Parliament,
Yep.
says, okay, are you okay with this? So this year, the plan is for, and I think we have this chart, 310,000. We want 310,000 people. That's less than 0.85% of 1%.
Sure.
Of the Canadian population. So
That's
we have
what comes in legally, that's right.
That's okay. That's what we want. That's what the immigration plan calls for. And if
Sure.
you'll notice in blue, it says 177,500 people who are going to come here for economic reasons. That means they're going to make a contribution. So far, you're in agreement, right? They're
That's
going to make
right.
a
That's
contribution to increasing the wealth of Canada.
Sure.
Except that doesn't always work.
Well, the reason it doesn't work is because we've got these great laws, and then we've got the minister standing up saying, here's the plan. And it's all makes wonderful sense. But what the minister forgets to do, and the government behind him forgets to do, is fairness in advertising. They are not acknowledging that their laws and their pie charts and their numbers are being driven by policies.
Okay, well, which policies are you talking about?
Well, what concerns me the most, and the three policies that drive everything off the rails, doesn't drive it off the rails for everybody, but now today I'm thinking specifically of trades employers in Ontario.
Okay, but why are you thinking that? So what are these three policies?
Well, these three policies, number one, what they don't tell you at the beginning of the year is that they will. The golden rule is that Quebec must get 20% of the immigrants.
So they're going to get 20% of that 177,000.
They're going to get, come hell or high water, whatever the programs are, they're going to get 20%. And then the rest of Canada outside of Ontario gets 40%, and Ontario gets 40%. And the minister, and that would seem reasonably fair, 20, 40, 40. But what they don't say is what's the demand for those workers in Ontario vis-a-vis the demand in the West and in Quebec.
Okay, but just a second now. So you're saying it starts off with Quebec's going to get 20% of these people no matter what
That's
happens.
right.
Okay, so everybody else has to share the rest.
That's right.
Irrespective of what the economic demand might be.
Irrespective.
So if there's a greater demand in the Ontario economy for these workers,
Yeah.
they're out of luck.
Right out.
So if my math serves me correctly, the 177,500 economic workers, only about 30,000 of them are going to be slated for Ontario.
Yeah. And that gets us into the second policy that's really a killer for Ontario employers and the Ontario economy. An example, I don't know if we've got the chart here or not, but only 4% of all economic immigrants coming into Canada are with the trades. And so
So it's a chart on the breakdown of, I think we have that chart. It's the breakdown of how these economic migrants are divided up.
That's right. You know, Joe, you go year after year after year, and what do you get? No matter what program it is, you lump it all together, and if you're a white-collar management administrator, boss or worker, you're going to get 27% in the last 5-year period, starting 2010. That hasn't changed. But if you're a trades worker, it's 4%.
So let's just stop for a moment.
And that's a policy.
But who makes this decision about what the economy needs?
Well, it's who makes that decision is a command control economy. We have some unknown forces or people or faces sitting in Ottawa, and they say they consult. And they have this elaborate consultation process.
Yeah.
And no matter what they come up with, it's consistently that certain jobs, certain trades get 4%, 5%, and others get 29, 30%. And Ottawa does not come clean with bosses, with the economy, with the sectors. You go to the first 50 construction employers or restaurant operators here in Ontario, and you say to them, oh, by the way, your quota is only 4% of the total. They're going to fall off the tree.
But that's nationwide. 4% is nationwide. So obviously it's a lot less for Ontario when you break down the numbers.
That's right.
Because 4% is about 6,800. So about 6,800 for the trades and semi-skilled workers nationwide. You come down into Ontario, Toronto, and you don't have them.
And this is why we have the undocumented situation.
Why?
Why? Because the folks in Ottawa, they give us these perfect pie charts, these perfect laws, these perfect rules, and then they screw it all up with their policies,
so
where they want to dictate what the economy needs here in this country.
No, but look, you're a lawyer. I know there's a lot of lawyers in the immigration business.
Sure.
So what do? Don't they have an impact on this? Don't they feed back into the government?
Who, the lawyers?
Yeah.
You know, the lawyers. The days are over when lawyers advocate for industries, for sectors, for the reality of what the industry requires.
So where does the government get its information?
Its immigration law has become an industry. The consultants, the lawyers, they basically fill out forms and they adjust themselves to government policies, and the law is quite secondary.
It's an insane process. Now,
Well, of course it's insane.
You and I have had this discussion before. Look,
Sure.
So you've got 4% of 177,500
Yep.
are economic immigrants. These
Yep.
are the people that the government of Canada says are required to fill the needs of the Canadian economy. Just think about it for a second.
Yeah.
177,000 jobs. This is really what it means.
Yep.
177,500 jobs are going to go unfilled. We've got to go abroad to get them.
Yep.
That's what it means. Or am I wrong?
Well, that's what what
Okay,
immigration is all about.
But that's with the whole country. So somebody in Canada, human resources, et cetera, is figuring out that only this many fishermen is.
Who are these people there to figure things out? We have things called businesses, employers, and what they used to do is simply say, "I need this guy to get this job done."
So the person in Human
"Okay."
Resources Canada turns around, goes to the immigration minister and says, "Yeah, I need 177,000 bricklayers, form workers, asphalt and so on, roofers, and I need to know what these guys fit in."
Look at Joe. Look, when you were there, weren't you troubled by the fact that you, sitting up on this great throne, the Wizard of Oz throne, were being asked to dictate two bosses, two employers, two industries who they could bring in? Didn't that bother you?
Well, of course it bothered me, but I said something that we talked about the other day. We can do this checkoff list.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here in Ottawa, I can do this checkoff list.
That's all they do.
And my dad used to say to me, "Listen, I need you to go to university because you're not smart enough to be a carpenter."
Here.
So what happens is, you do the checkoff list, and the guy needs a carpenter.
Well, it's dysfunctional.
So
put
the
it
carpenter,
politely.
the subcontractor finds somebody. He finds somebody who wants to hire him.
And what does he say? He says, I don't want to know about this law. I don't want to know about Ottawa. I don't want to know about the rules. I will break the law. I will break the rules. Don't bother me with the rules.
So, in other words, say, why don't you substitute this checkoff list for good common sense?
There we go again.
So that's substitutive evaluation.
And the
so
law
what does
is
it
there.
involve? What does it involve?
What it involves is you have the law, and then you have, as always in Canada, the reality. The law is so simple. The law says that if the boss, that carpenter, that cement guy, that restaurant guy, that engineer, that computer operator, if the boss says, I need this guy, I want this guy, the guy has proven himself. He is successfully economically established in Canada.
Because I've given him a job.
He's not sitting in Zaire someplace. He's in Canada.
Or any other place.
Or any other country. And he is successfully established. That's the standard. So one would think that if I'm the boss, I go to immigration and I say, I got this guy or this gal, and she's successfully established in Canada, pays taxes. I need this person. And Ottawa, under the law, is supposed to say, okay, let's assess this situation, and if two officers agree, the guy or the gal stays. It's common sense. It's been there
but
forever.
it has to be two people, not just one.
Two people.
Two people from Immigration Canada have to look at this and they have to agree that the substitutive evaluation applies.
That's right.
Okay? Otherwise, what happens is we get. I think you had the chart that we used the other day where you have undocumented versus documented. So the number of undocumented people continues to increase.
Well, that's because, once again, policy number 4 coming of Ottawa is thou shalt not use substituted evaluation.
Well, that's insane.
Well, of course it's insane.
But I can go to my any subcontractor in the carpentry business, any contractor, subcontractor in the farming business, and they know what they need.
Ottawa policy determination on substituted evaluation doesn't even match the Wizard of Oz behind the curtains. They refuse to acknowledge that there is a law to legalize the workers and the employers. They don't want to acknowledge it. Why? Because it doesn't fit into their little policies.
Okay, so we talked about three policies that impact on this number. So we got 310,000 that we need in this country because there's a declining population. Yep. Okay, there's an aging population.
Sure.
We need active workers. So we need 310. Minister Ahmed Hussein says that's how many we need, gets the approval of Parliament. Now we got to start dividing up the numbers. I think we have some chart there, but we divide up the numbers. 20% go to Quebec no matter what. Everybody else has got to be able to speak English or speak French. And so here in Ontario, we're only going to get 40% of the total.
Sure.
But if the economy is creating more jobs than 40% of 177,000, what do you do?
Joe, look,
you recruit them yourself?
I don't care what they do. Look, everybody makes mistakes. Systems aren't perfect. These are great targets. If they use these policies, if they use them as targets, and then they acknowledge nothing in life is perfect, policies make mistakes, everybody makes mistakes, so let's use substituted evaluation to fix the situation that fall through the cracks.
But you need partnership of the private sector to do that, don't you?
Partnership. The law is very simple. The immigration officer, he looks to see, he needs a letter, an offer from the employer. The private sector has to show its commitment to substitute evaluation on a case-by-case, file-by-file basis.
So I want to touch on something else just for a minute before we have to close off again. So here we are in Ontario. You know, the big issue in Ontario now is somebody's got to pay for all these refugees that come in.
Wow,
But the immigration plan plans for another 43,000. 15% of the overall 315,000 are going to be refugees. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you agree.
I agree.
So, but what happens is when people more than that number comes in, somebody's got to pay for it. And right now, I know your friend Doug Ford, the Premier, is saying, well, I didn't cause this problem. You pay up.
Well, where this is going, and I think Doug Ford, and I hope Doug Ford takes it this direction, is that Ottawa, you created a mess on the refugee side. Here's my bill for $200 million on behalf of the Ontario taxpayers. I think Ford has no way out but to say, Ottawa, you've created this policy mess that's created 500,000 undocumented workers in Ontario.
1 million nationwide.
500,000 in Ontario. That's costing the Ontario taxpayer in lost tax revenue up to $3 billion.
And more.
And more.
So, but
Plus,
we'll get
and
into
their
that.
kids and their kids at 1.23 billion. I think because Ottawa now has had a carte blanche. They've been screwing around with this thing for years, where their policies trump the law. The Ontario taxpayer is being slaughtered because of Ottawa policies, and I think the time is coming when Doug Ford will go to Ahmed Hussein, whoever replaces him, hopefully, with the bill, with the account saying, Ottawa, you are costing the Ontario taxpayer at least, drop that minimum, $4 billion a year. Give me the money.
So you're taking this latest maneuver as an indication of the direction that the province of Ontario is going to follow.
I think it's historical and it's wonderful. It's the province exerting its.
But there's another way to do that. I mean, he can ask for money, and the government of Canada can flow over the money. But there's an easier solution to that.
Which is?
Well, what we've been talking about, substitute evaluation.
Yeah, but they won't do it.
Yeah, but it's the easiest thing to do. You assess whether anybody can do the job, and they're
don't,
economically.
Joe, they don't. Ottawa doesn't care if there are illegals.
Right, but
they don't want. They would prefer illegals. I'm
but
convinced
they're
of
economically. They are economically integrated. They're demographically integrated.
There you go again. You're being logical.
Well, that's what you've got to do if you want to present this plan.
You cannot deal with Ahmed Hussein and his people logically. Doug Ford has to go to them with the account and say, you're costing us $4 billion minimum.
We're going to ask
Give me the money.
We're going to ask you to do something with that account. So what we're going to do is we're going to save that for the next program.
Good.
What we're going to talk about, because we started by separating parents and children.
Sure.
We're going into skilled labor. We're talking about substitutive evaluation. We're going to talk about the quotas, otherwise known as targets, and then we're going to talk about the cost.
Very
so
good.
If you agree, you're going to come back. We'll talk
Pleasure.
about the cost.
Pleasure.
And on behalf of Go Live TV, Corcan Media Group, and Corriere Canadese, this is Joe Volpe, thanking you all for watching, thanking you
Sir.
for joining us, and we'll see you on our next occasion.